So when I was a little girl, I remember my mother telling me how to be a good host when my friends came over to our house. There was basically one rule. That person is your guest, so let them play with your toys, even the ones you don't want to share. Pretty straightforward. I didn't like this rule. I also remember her telling me how to be a good guest. So when I went over to the other person's house, there was also rules. And this rule was, your friend is the host, so just do what they say. And tell their mother thank you. I never really thought that these rules matched up, but I also was not fond of defying my mother at that point, so I just went with it. But looking back at them now, what I notice is that they lay out the power structure between host and guest pretty well. When you're hosting someone, you have a lot of influence over how they're treated, not only by you, but by the other people there. You can make your guest miserable with your actions or your attitude, or you can make them feel perfectly at home. The power is yours. As a guest, you're kind of at the host's mercy until you decide to leave, unless you're not a very good guest, according to my mother, in which case you could turn the tables. But I think most of us were taught kind of the way I was, and we tend to kind of go with what the host wants. So it turns out there's a certain amount of trust needed to go to a play date or a birthday party. It's not something you usually think about. Our scripture today deals with hosting and being a guest as well. Jesus is at a dinner at the Pharisees' house. Now, what's important to know here is that even though the Pharisees are usually one of the villains in our gospel stories, they were actually really important guys. Always guys. They were really important guys in the community. They were leaders in the synagogue, think church. And they sometimes were responsible for communication between the Roman occupiers, that is to say, the city government, and their church. And it wasn't a city government like what we're used to here. This city government could really hurt you. So they were very important people. Going to a dinner at one of their houses was a great honor. What Jesus notices when he gets to this house, it's sort of shocking that he was invited, but what he notices when he gets there is that every guest is aware of the power dynamic, and they're all trying to be the most important person. They're all jockeying for position. I mean, I can almost see them sort of like standing close to someone who's near the host and just sort of slipping their shoulder in and being like, yeah, yeah. Interestingly, there was no one at this dinner who wasn't also important to the community somehow. Something to think about. Jesus says to everyone there, when you go to a dinner party, don't try to be the most important. Someone else is just as important as you are. And you'd hate to be singled out for noticing or for not noticing. Now, I'm sure that there were some uncomfortable looks when he said that. Hard truths usually get you glared at. But he wasn't done. Jesus is never done, is he? He also said, if you're hosting the dinner party, don't just invite people like this. Host everybody, including the ones who can't invite you back. Because you don't know what they might need. All of this was a polite way of saying, not one of you is better than another person. Because God made every single one of you. You, Pharisee, you're a leader of the synagogue. You know this, that God made every single one of us. No one person is more important to God than another because God took time over every single person when they were made. Putting one another down, trying to show your own superiority over everyone else, it just doesn't make sense. Everyone is trying to show how powerful they are, but it's to no avail in the long run. You could even say it's a little bit insulting, both for the person being put down and for God, because God is the one that created that person you're putting down. To quote an earthy grandma type I met while living in St. Louis, God don't make junk. So don't go treating everything God made like junk. So I want all of us to explore this together. I'll say a few words, and then I'll say, God made something, and you all respond, and God don't make junk. So let's practice for a minute. God made oranges, and
God don't make junk.
You've got it. When I was practicing this with my husband at home, he was like, but you guys have it. So at school, there's a lot of curriculum now on how to handle a bully. Kids that I was talking to before, have you guys gotten lectures about what you do if someone's being mean repeatedly on the playground? I know mine have, and not just from me. I'm really glad, because when I was in school, they didn't do that. You just had to figure it out or get beat up. So a bully can be defined as someone who does something hurtful to you over and over again on purpose. It's someone who doesn't realize that you should be cherished and treated well, and they're trying to take your power away from you. We must always find a way to stand up to bullies, because God made us, and
God don't make junk.
A bully tries to convince us that there's no place at the table for us, but they're wrong. Sorry. We'll get that better. But at the same time, we really don't like the bully. And who does? A bully doesn't do much to make themselves likable or lovable. But usually, a bully doesn't really like themselves either, and that's why they're trying to take your power. That's why they're trying to put you down, because maybe if they put you down, they'll feel a little bit higher. Even though it's not a good idea to spend too much time around someone who wants to hurt you, it is good to remember that God made that person, and
God don't make junk.
Don't let yourself get hurt, but have some compassion too, if from a distance. Or here's a tough one. If you're driving on a busy street or the freeway, and another driver acts like they own the road. They cut people off, they stop short, they don't signal, they're not even looking half the time. They are exerting their authority as a driver over everyone around them, and no one said they could. You really want to throw something at them. Kids, have you ever heard your parents muttering to themselves or cursing out loud, and you're sitting there going, I know if I say something, I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah, my kids have too. But they just make you so angry. Take a breath. Literally distance yourself from that person. And remember, they may be terrible drivers, but God made them, and
God don't make junk.
or let's add a twist, what if you're the terrible driver that day? Now, I'm sure no one here has ever had a driving day like that. But just in case, while you're in a hurry to get to point B, and there may be a very good reason, everyone else seems to be in your way. And they're all slow. They don't seem to know that you're coming, even though how could they not know that you're coming? But the fact is, they need to get to wherever they're going safely, and you're using your power and authority as a driver to make that a lot harder. Actually, you're actually endangering yourself. Before you can get angry with the slowpokes around you or get too down on yourself, remember, God made all the drivers, and
God don't make junk.
power dynamics on the road require some extra reminders, I think. I live just off the 91 freeway, so I totally get it. What about something a little more controversial? There's an election coming, and the campaign season has started in earnest. Already, rude and disparaging remarks are being made, not just by the candidates. They're still mostly on their best behavior. Mostly on their best behavior, but by the electorate, by the voters. And we've just started. We've got a whole year till 2020. the election in 2020. We all know what hateful language can do to our society and culture. We know what it's been doing for several years. We know how it tears things apart, and so that even kids on the playground are using political fodder to bully each other. Everyone is jockeying for position and authority. Doesn't it seem like it? We forget when we get wrapped up in the rhetoric and the judgments. Oh my goodness, so many judgments to make so little time. And the fervor of disagreement that God created every one of us, including those that we think are wrong or even dangerous. And though it boggles the mind, God made those people, and
God don't make junk.
you followed through on that one. That one was hard. I know it was. Last one. Some days are the kind where nothing is going right. You've made mistakes that you're not proud of. Someone you trust might have hurt your feelings somehow, and you spilled something all down the front of your favorite shirt. The whole world is against you, and you feel horrible. The dinner party that Jesus talked about sounds like something you won't be invited to, of course. And you certainly wouldn't want to host one either, because who would show up? It's just that kind of day. You're at a point where you feel powerless, and in feeling powerless, you give away everything you were born with. Remember, everyone makes mistakes, including ourselves and our good friends. Your shirt will wash, a little OxyClean will get the stain out. You feel horrible now, but be cheered by the idea that God made you, and
God don't make junk.
you belong at every dinner party if you want to go. If you're more introverted and you want to stay home with your glass of wine, that's cool too. If you hosted a party, everyone who can come is going to want to. It's just a fact. Don't ever give away the authority and power that God made you with by thinking that you have none. It's easy to do. And when you have a bad day at school or a bad day at work, just hang on to that. I know it sounds kind of silly, this litany of God don't make junk. And over here on the West Coast, we don't hear phrases like that very much, but I heard it a lot in the churches that I served in the Midwest. It was usually older ladies, and they were very much in earnest. Don't you be putting yourself down. God don't make junk. It's stuck with me ever since. I kind of wish I'd grown up with it, because I gotta say, high school would have been a lot easier with that phrase. When Jesus gave his host, guest, and all those guests advice, it wasn't the sort of thing you might find in a Miss Manners column. It was a reminder that we are all equal in the eyes of God. Then, as now, it's so easy to fall into assumptions about another person's worth or even your own worth. But Jesus reminds us that we're all created by God with different attributes, different talents, different ways of being both lovable and annoying. God crafted each person with care. That means the horrible driver who just cut you off in traffic is valuable. So are you. The bully who doesn't know when to quit is valuable. So's the person trying to escape them. The neighbor who wants to debate the issues till they're blue in the face and you're going to pass out is valuable. And you are valuable. How often does someone say that to you? You are valuable. You're as worthy as anyone else because God made you, and
God don't make junk.
amen?